Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner Stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? I paid for access to a dark web live stream of Antarctica. The host claimed to show the entrance to a hidden civilization. Part 1. The invite. Alright, before I start, let me say this. I'm not a dark web junkie. I'm not one of those weirdos who dives into the depths of the internet looking for illegal stuff. I'm just a regular guy. Well, maybe not completely regular, because I have this one bad habit. I can't resist a good conspiracy. You know, those crazy YouTube rabbit holes about secret government bases, the moon landing being fake, or alien sightings. Yeah. That's my guilty pleasure. So when I stumbled across this random thread in a forum about Antarctica's hidden secrets, I was intrigued. It was on Reddit, in one of those weird subs that toes the line between conspiracy theories and actual evidence. Most of the time, it's harmless stuff. People talking about flat Earth, underground cities, that sort of thing. But one comment stood out. It was this guy. His username was something like Deep Freeze Access, and he claimed he had live footage of something nobody else has ever seen. He was vague, but it had to do with Antarctica. He kept dropping these hints about secret tunnels, ancient technology, and some kind of civilization buried beneath the ice. I thought it was just another troll trying to hype up their scam. But then he posted a screenshot. It wasn't much, just a grainy black and white image of what looked like a massive, perfectly round hole in the ice. It looked unnatural, too smooth, too perfect to be just a cave or crevasse. And that's when I noticed the comments. People were losing it. Is this real? How do I see more? DM me the link. It wasn't just randoms either. Some of the commenters had those long-standing Reddit accounts with tons of karma, the kind you assume belong to people who don't fall for scams. After lurking for a while, I saw the guy post a follow-up. He claimed he was hosting a live stream the next night on a private server. The catch? It wasn't free. You had to pay for access. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who the hell pays for something like that? Especially from a sketchy dude on the internet. But I couldn't help myself. It wasn't even about believing him. It was the mystery of it all. The idea that I might see something insane, something no one else had ever seen. So I DM'd him. The response was instant, like he was waiting for me. He sent me a link to a payment page. Bitcoin only, of course. The price? $500. Yeah, I know, that's insane. But I figured, worst case scenario, I'd lose the money and learn my lesson. Best case, I'd get some wild story to tell my friends. I paid. I didn't sleep that night. After the stream cut to black, my mind was buzzing with a mix of adrenaline and unease. That doorway at the bottom of the pit, something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just the size or the glowing symbols. It was the presence of it, like it was watching, waiting. The chat had blown up in chaos right after the screen went dark. Messages flew past at lightning speed. Was that it? Is this a scam? What's behind the door? I sat there staring at the blank video screen, wondering if I'd just flushed $500 down the drain. But then something happened that made my stomach drop. I got an email. It wasn't from some generic automated system. It was a personal email sent from the same username, Deep Freeze Access. The subject line read, "You've been selected." At this point, I wasn't even thinking straight. I clicked it without hesitation, and inside was a single line of text. "Congratulations. You've earned exclusive access. Instructions will follow." Attached was a PDF. I opened it, and my heart sank. It was a waiver. You know, one of those legal-sounding documents full of jargon that basically boils down to, "We're not responsible if you die." Only this one wasn't about physical harm. It was about mental harm. It mentioned things like psychological distress, hallucinations, and irreversible trauma. But the weirdest part was the very last line. "By signing, you acknowledge that you are willing to witness what lies beyond the threshold." I don't know why I signed it. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that this was all a hoax. Either way, I scrawled my signature on the screen with my finger and sent it back. Within minutes, I got another email. This time, it was a link. A private server, just like before. Only this link didn't take me to a live stream. It took me to a chat room. The room was empty at first, just me and a blank screen with a timer at the top, counting down from 2 hours. Below it, there was a message in bold red text: "Remain online. Failure to comply will result in termination of your access." I didn't know what termination meant, but I wasn't about to find out. So I waited. About 15 minutes in, the first message popped up. It wasn't from me. User 456. Is this real? Before I could respond, more messages started appearing. Icebreaker 77. I saw the stream. What was behind the door? Polar code. This better not be another scam. The room quickly filled up with people. At least 100, maybe more. It was chaos. Everyone was asking the same questions. What was this about? Why were we here? Did anyone know what happened after the stream? Then, the screen flickered. A new user joined the chat. Admin. The message was short, but it shut everyone up instantly. Admin. Prepare yourselves. The truth is not for the faint of heart. The timer hit 0. After the feed cut out, I sat frozen in front of my laptop. My entire body was tense, like my muscles were bracing for something that hadn't arrived yet. The silence in my room felt deafening, and I swear the air itself felt heavier. For the next few minutes, I just stared at the blank screen. The chat room was gone, the website was gone, and my emails were eerily quiet. It was like none of it had ever existed. But then my phone buzzed. It wasn't a text, call, or notification. It was static. My phone was just sitting on my desk, vibrating sporadically, the screen flickering between black and this weird, pixelated mess. I picked it up, but before I could do anything, a message appeared. It was just one word. Stop. I dropped the phone, like it had burned me. The screen went black for a second, and then it rebooted like normal. But the message was gone. There wasn't even a trace of it in my notifications or logs. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I was just spooked, that my phone had glitched because of a bad signal or something. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Something wasn't right, and it wasn't just my phone. Later that night, I started hearing noises. It began as faint scratching sounds, almost like nails dragging across wood. At first, I thought it was my upstairs neighbor moving furniture or something, but the more I listened, the more I realized it was coming from inside my apartment. The sound wasn't consistent. It would start and stop at random intervals. sometimes closer, sometimes farther away. I checked every corner, every closet, and every cabinet, but there was nothing there. Then came the whispers. They were faint, almost inaudible, but I swear they were coming from the walls. It wasn't words exactly, more like a soft, guttural murmuring, as if someone, or something, was trying to speak but didn't know how. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was being watched. The next morning, I decided I'd had enough. I needed answers. I went back to the original forum, where I'd found the link to the live stream. But the thread was gone, completely wiped, not just deleted, like it had never existed. Even the usernames of people who had commented were missing. I tried searching for anything related to deep freeze access, or that eerie footage of the doorway, but there was nothing. It was like the internet had collectively agreed to erase all evidence of it. And then I remembered the screenshots. During the stream, people in the chat had been uploading screenshots of the glowing symbols and the doorway. I'd saved a couple of them myself, just in case I wanted to share them later. I opened my screenshots folder and they weren't there. At first, I thought I'd accidentally deleted them, but when I checked my recycle bin, it was empty. I tried recovery software, but there was nothing to recover. Every single file related to that stream was gone. That's when the paranoia set in. The man in the coat. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. You know that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, like someone's eyes are boring into you. I felt that constantly. A few days later, I noticed him for the first time. I was sitting in the Starbucks near my apartment, trying to distract myself with a podcast and a caramel latte. The place was packed, typical morning rush hour, but I felt a weird tension in the air, like something wasn't right. That's when I saw him. He was standing across the street, completely still, facing the window where I was sitting. He was wearing a long black coat and a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over his face. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them. At first, I thought he was just some random guy waiting for a bus or something, but he didn't move, not an inch. He just stood there, staring. I tried to ignore him, convincing myself I was imagining things, but when I glanced back 5 minutes later, he was still there. Same spot, same posture. I packed up my stuff and left. For the next few days, I kept seeing him. He was outside my building when I came home from work, standing at the corner of the park while I walked my dog, sitting in a car parked across the street from my apartment, the brim of his hat barely visible through the windshield. He never approached me, never said a word, but he didn't need to. Just knowing he was there was enough to drive me insane. I started keeping my blinds closed and avoiding public places. I even stopped answering my phone because every time it rang, I was convinced it would be him. But the worst part, the scratches in my apartment started getting louder. The breaking point. One night, I woke up to the sound of something heavy scraping against my bedroom floor. My heart nearly stopped. The sound was so loud, so close, I could feel the vibrations through my mattress. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, scanning the room. At first, everything looked normal. My desk was where it should be. My clothes were still piled on the chair in the corner, and my door was shut. But then I saw it. Long, jagged claw marks trailing from the door to the foot of my bed. I swear my heart stopped. There was no way I'd done that. No way it could have been there before. I leaned over the side of the bed to get a better look, and that's when I heard it. Breathing. Deep, raspy, wet breathing. It was coming from under the bed. I froze, my flashlight shaking in my hand. Every rational part of me was screaming to run, but I couldn't move. It was like my body was paralyzed by the sheer primal fear coursing through me. Then, slowly, the breathing stopped. I don't know what possessed me to look. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe I just needed to know what was under there. I leaned over and angled my flashlight toward the floor. And there it was. A face. Pale, stretched thin, with empty black pits where the eyes should have been. Its mouth was wide open, filled with rows of jagged teeth, and it was smiling. Before I could scream, it lunged. The last thing I remember was its cold, clammy hand wrapping around my ankle and dragging me down. I woke up to the sound of my own ragged breathing. For a split second, I thought it was over, just a nightmare, one of those hyper-real dreams that leaves you drenched in sweat and questioning reality. But as my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I realized I wasn't in my room anymore. I was lying on a cold, hard floor. The surface beneath me wasn't wood or carpet. It was stone, smooth and cold, with a faint dampness that clung to my skin. My head throbbed, and when I reached up to touch my temple, my fingers came back sticky with blood. I sat up, trying to steady my breathing. The room around me was massive, far larger than anything I could have imagined fitting in my apartment. The walls were made of the same dark stone as the floor, covered in those strange glowing symbols I'd seen in the stream. They pulsed faintly, casting an eerie blue light across the space. The air was heavy, thick with a smell I couldn't place, something metallic, mixed with the sharp tang of decay. I wasn't alone. At first, I didn't see them. The room was so vast, and the light from the symbols was too dim to illuminate everything. But as my eyes adjusted, I noticed movement, shapes. They were crouched in the far corners of the room, huddled together like animals. Their bodies were emaciated, skin stretched tight over bones, but it was their faces that made my stomach drop. No eyes, just empty sockets, black and endless, staring out from gaunt skulls. Their mouths hung open, revealing rows of jagged teeth, glinting faintly in the blue light. They didn't move toward me. Not yet. They just watched. And then I heard it. A low, guttural sound that started as a whisper and grew into a deep, resonant hum. It wasn't coming from the creatures. It was coming from the walls. The symbols were changing. They shifted and twisted, their light growing brighter as the hum grew louder. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, like they were reacting to something. To me. The table. Sudden, violent shudder ran through the room, knocking me off balance. The creatures in the corners stirred, their heads snapping toward the source of the noise. In the center of the room, something was rising from the floor. It was a table, or at least that's what it looked like at first. But as it emerged, I realized it wasn't made of stone or metal. It was made of flesh. The surface was slick and uneven, covered in a patchwork of skin that pulsed and twitched as if it were alive. Veins ran through it like rivers, glowing faintly with the same blue light as the symbols. On top of the table was something worse. A single object, small and innocuous at first glance. A knife. But it wasn't like any knife I'd ever seen. The blade was jagged, almost serrated, and it shimmered with an oily black substance that seemed to writhe and shift on its surface. The handle was made of bone, carved into intricate, twisting patterns. The hum in the air grew louder, pressing against my skull like a physical weight. Then the voice came. "You have been chosen," the command. It wasn't the same distorted voice, from the stream. This was deeper, more guttural, and it echoed through the room as if the walls themselves were speaking. I turned, trying to find the source, but there was nothing. Just the symbols, glowing brighter and brighter until the room was bathed in an otherworldly light. "You sought the truth," the voice said. "Now you must prove yourself worthy of it." Before I could respond, the creatures moved. They didn't lunge or attack. Instead, they crawled toward the table, their movements jerky and unnatural. One by one, they stopped and knelt, their eyeless faces turned toward me. The hum in the air shifted, becoming something darker, something primal. "Take the blade," the voice commanded. I didn't move. My legs felt like lead, and my hands were trembling so badly I could barely keep them at my sides. "Take it!" The force of the voice knocked me back a step, and suddenly, I was moving, against my will. My body wasn't mine anymore. My feet dragged me forward, closer and closer to the table. The smell of the flesh was overwhelming now, a sickening mix of rot and something chemical. My stomach churned, but I couldn't stop. My hand reached out, hovering above the blade. "Prove yourself," the voice said. The sacrifice. The creatures were still kneeling, their heads bowed, but as my hand closed around the handle of the knife, they began to move. Their mouths stretched open wider than should have been possible, revealing not just teeth, but rows upon rows of smaller, needle-like spines lining their throats. A wet, clicking sound echoed through the room as their jaws unhinged, and they began to chant. It wasn't words, it was noise, a guttural, rhythmic sound that made my skin crawl and my teeth ache. "Offer them to the truth," the voice said, "or offer yourself." The weight of the knife in my hand was unbearable. The oily substance on the blade seemed to seep into my skin, spreading a cold, burning sensation up my arm. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. All I could hear was the voice, growing louder and more insistent. "Choose." One of the creatures crawled closer, its bony hands outstretched, its eyeless face tilted upward, waiting. The knife felt like it was alive in my grip, pulsating with a rhythm that matched the chanting. I raised it. What happened next is a blur. I don't remember making the decision. I don't even remember moving. All I know is that when I came to, the room was silent. The creatures were gone. The knife was still in my hand, but it was clean now. No oily substance, no blood, just cold, lifeless metal. The table had sunk back into the floor, leaving nothing but smooth stone behind. And then I heard it. Faint footsteps, echoing from the far end of the room. I wasn't alone. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, echoing off the stone walls like a countdown. I held my breath, gripping the knife so tightly my fingers ached. The silence between each step stretched endlessly, filled only by the faint hum still lingering in the air. And then I saw it. From the farthest edge of the room, a figure emerged, stepping into the dim light cast by the glowing symbols. It wasn't one of the creatures. It was a man, or at least it looked like one. He was tall, unnaturally so, with limbs that seemed too long and a posture that was almost serpentine. His skin was pale and waxy, stretched taut over sharp cheekbones, and a face devoid of expression. But his eyes were the worst part. They weren't empty like the creatures. They were filled with something dark, swirling like black ink in water, as if they were alive. As he moved closer, the symbols on the walls began to flicker, their steady pulsing turning erratic, chaotic. He stopped a few feet away from me, tilting his head like he was studying me. "You've proven yourself," he said, his voice smooth but hollow, like it was coming from the depths of a cavern. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even move. My body was frozen, paralyzed by the sheer wrongness of him. "What lies beyond this place is not for mortals," he continued, his lips barely moving. "But you've touched the edge of it. You've tasted the truth." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my throat felt like it was filled with sand. "Do you feel it yet?" he asked, taking another step closer. I didn't know what he meant. Feel what? My chest felt tight, my head pounding like it was being split open. "You brought it with you," he said, smiling faintly. "The moment you opened that door, it came with you. It's in your mind, in your blood." I shook my head, taking a step back, but he followed, closing the distance between us, effortlessly. "You think you escaped," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But you didn't. It's here." He reached out, his impossibly long fingers brushing against my forehead. The moment he touched me, my vision exploded. The vision. I wasn't in the room anymore. I was everywhere. The ground fell away, and I was surrounded by darkness, an infinite void, filled with distant whispers that seemed to come from all directions at once. Shapes moved in the shadows, vast and incomprehensible, their forms shifting and writhing like smoke. I tried to focus, but every time I thought I saw something, it vanished, replaced by something worse. Then I saw it. Far in the distance, a massive, pulsating mass of flesh and light, twisting and expanding like a living storm. Its surface was covered in eyes, thousands of them, all staring directly at me. It wasn't just watching me, it was inside me. The whispers grew louder, forming words that didn't make sense, and yet I understood them. They weren't words meant for humans. They were thoughts, alien and invasive, burrowing into my mind like parasites. "You belong to us now," the voices said. The mass began to move, shifting toward me with impossible speed. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The void stretched endlessly in every direction. As it closed in, I felt something break inside me, a crack in my very being, like my soul was being peeled away layer by layer. And then I was back. The escape. I woke up on my apartment floor, gasping for air. My body was drenched in sweat, and my head felt like it had been split open with an axe. At first, I thought it was over, that I'd somehow escaped. But as I looked around, I realized something was wrong. The walls of my apartment were covered in symbols, the same glowing, pulsing symbols from the stream. They stretched from floor to ceiling, twisting and writhing like living veins. The air was thick with the same hum, vibrating in my skull, and I could still feel it, the presence from the vision. It wasn't just in my apartment, it was inside me. I stumbled to my feet, grabbing my phone to call for help, but the screen was dead. No signal, no Wi-Fi, just static. And then I heard the whispers. They were coming from every direction, faint but growing louder with every passing second. I ran to the door, yanking it open, only to find nothing. The hallway outside my apartment was gone. In its place was a long, dark tunnel, the walls slick with some kind of black, viscous substance. The symbols were there too, glowing faintly in the distance. There was no escape. The final choice. The whispers grew louder, forming words I couldn't understand but felt. They weren't asking, they were commanding. And then I saw the table again. It was in the middle of my living room, rising up from the floor like before. The knife was there too, glinting in the faint light. I didn't need to be told what to do. I knew. The only way to end it was to finish what I'd started, to make a sacrifice. But who? The whispers gave me the answer. A name, a face, someone I knew, someone I loved. I fell to my knees, clutching my head as the whispers became deafening, pounding in my skull like a drum. They wouldn't stop. They wouldn't let me go. I crawled toward the table, my hand trembling as I reached for the knife. The last thing I remember is the feeling of cold metal in my hand, the blade pulsating with the same dark energy I'd felt in that room. And then, nothing. Aftermath. When I woke up, the table was gone. The symbols were gone. My apartment looked normal again, like nothing had happened. But the whispers are still there. They're quieter now, but they never stop. They're always in the back of my mind, reminding me of what I saw, what I did. And every so often, when I close my eyes, I see it. The doorway. It's waiting for me. It's waiting for all of us. I discovered a dark web page selling Censored scientific research. One document claims the moon isn't natural. Let me start by saying, I'm not one of those conspiracy nuts. You know the type. The guys on TikTok rambling about lizard people and secret government bunkers. That's not me. I like to think I'm pretty normal. I go to Starbucks way too much, waste hours on Instagram, scrolling through dog videos, and occasionally splurge on a Big Mac at McDonald's, even though I know it's terrible for me. I don't believe in UFOs or ghosts, but I do believe in weird stuff happening when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And last month, I found myself in exactly the wrong place. It all started on Reddit, as these things usually do. I was bored, scrolling through odd/unresolved mysteries late one night. I had just gotten home from work, bartending at this dive near Times Square, and I wasn't ready to crash yet. Someone posted this thread about deep web rabbit holes, and honestly, it sounded like BS, but I clicked on it anyway. People in the comments were swapping stories about weird websites they'd found on the dark web, secret forums, encrypted chat rooms, even sites claiming to sell forbidden tech. Most of the stories seemed fake, like the guy who claimed to have found an entire marketplace for haunted objects. But one comment caught my eye. It was from this throwaway account called Data Leak Dave. You want real weird? Look up the XNR archive. It's where whistleblowers post suppressed scientific research that shouldn't exist. It's not a joke. This stuff gets deleted fast if anyone talks about it on the regular internet. The guy sounded like a troll, but the way he phrased it, like it was some forbidden fruit, hooked me. I'd messed around with Tor browser before, the gateway to the dark web, when I was in college, so I figured, why not? I wasn't expecting to find anything serious. Maybe some cringy clickbait or one of those fake hacking forums. But when I typed XNR archive into the search bar of this dark web directory, a single result popped up. The URL was just a string of random characters, like a license plate someone had typed with their eyes closed. The page loaded slowly, which made me nervous. You don't exactly want to be too patient on the dark web, but when it finally loaded, I realized this wasn't just some generic site. The homepage was weirdly professional. Black background, minimalistic layout, and a white logo. XNR in plain Helvetica. Below that, a single line of text read, "Classified research for sale, beyond the boundaries of modern science." It had this list of categories: biological anomalies, physics of the unknown, space irregularities, each one sounding more unhinged than the last. This didn't look like the usual sketchy junk you'd expect. It was almost too polished, like something a disgruntled ex-NASA employee would throw together. I almost backed out. The whole thing felt wrong. But then I clicked on the Space Irregularities tab. The listings were absurd. Titles like Pre-1969, Evidence Suggesting Lunar Manipulation, Lost Correspondence Between Nikola Tesla and John F. Kennedy, 1962, Unexplained Orbital Patterns, Earth's Twin, Hiding in the Kuiper Belt. Each one had a price listed in Bitcoin. Some were going for thousands, others just a couple hundred. And then I saw it. Document 404, Lunar Construction Theories, Classified Briefing, 1983, 0.05 Bitcoin. Now, let me put this into perspective. Back then, 0.05 Bitcoin was around $1,500. Not exactly chump change, but not insane either. I was staring at this description, debating whether or not I was about to make the dumbest purchase of my life, when a message popped up on the screen. New visitor detected. Limited time discount applied to document 404. The price dropped to 0.01 Bitcoin, roughly $300. My hands were sweaty. I don't know why, but I felt like someone was watching me. Like this wasn't some automatic script, but an actual person baiting me. Against my better judgment, I paid. I don't even remember transferring the Bitcoin. It was like I blacked out for a second, and when I came to, the file was downloaded on my desktop. A PDF, Lunar Theories 1983.pdf. I stared at the file icon for a solid minute before double-clicking it. The document loaded, and the first thing I saw was a government header. United States Department of Defense. Restricted access. Classification level Omega 12. At the bottom of the page, there was a disclaimer in bold red letters. This document is not to be distributed outside secure channels. Violators will be prosecuted under the Espionage Act. My stomach dropped. This was way more than I bargained for. But the moment I started reading, it felt like the room got 10 degrees colder. The document was a technical breakdown of something I'd never heard of before. Lunar megastructures. According to the report, there was credible evidence suggesting the moon wasn't a natural satellite at all. Instead, it was described as an artificial construct of unknown origin. They had diagrams, grainy black and white scans showing internal chambers beneath the moon's surface. Apparently, there had been seismic anomalies recorded during the Apollo 12 mission, where the moon rang like a bell after the landing module impacted its surface. The document claimed this was further evidence of an artificial core. It got worse. One section described a supposed mission called Operation Kepri. It was a top-secret lunar probe launched in the 1980s, disguised as a weather satellite. The probe transmitted photos from the moon's far side, including images of something labeled as structural features inconsistent with natural formation. I couldn't make sense of the grainy photos in the document, but they looked like buildings, tall, spindly towers casting long shadows over the lunar surface. I didn't sleep that night. By the time the sun came up, I was still glued to my screen, rereading the document, trying to convince myself it was fake. But here's the thing. The level of detail was insane. Whoever wrote it had access to classified NASA logs, internal memos, even private communications between astronauts. I tried to share a snippet on Reddit the next day, just to see if anyone else had heard of this stuff. Within minutes, my account got banned. Not the post, my entire account. Then I got an email from a no-reply address. This is a courtesy warning. Do not attempt to share restricted material. This is your first and final notice. The scariest part, I hadn't linked my Reddit account to my personal email. By now, I've deleted the file from my computer, or at least I tried to. Sometimes, I still hear faint clicking noises coming from my laptop at night, even when it's shut down. And last week, I swear, I saw a black van parked across the street from my apartment. It was there all night. I don't know if any of this is real, or if I'm just losing it. But if you ever come across the XNR archive, don't click. Some things aren't meant to be known. You ever wake up and immediately feel like something's off? Like there's this heaviness in the air, but you can't quite put your finger on it. That's how I felt the morning after I deleted the file. My apartment felt colder than usual, and I swear I could hear a faint buzzing noise, like static from an old TV. At first, I chalked it up to being sleep deprived. I'd spent all night spiraling into every rabbit hole I could find about the moon, megastructures, and supposed secret missions. By the time I fell asleep, my brain was fried, but the feeling didn't go away. The first weird thing I noticed was my phone. When I checked it that morning, the battery was completely dead, even though I'd plugged it in overnight. No big deal, right? Maybe the cord was loose, but when I grabbed the charger, I realized it wasn't plugged into the wall. I never do that. Ever. Then there were my AirPods. I'd left them on my kitchen counter before bed, but now they were sitting on my desk, the case open. That's when it hit me. Someone had been in my apartment. I live on the 6th floor of a high-rise in Manhattan. My building has security cameras in the hallways, keycard access to the front door, the whole 9 yards. There's no way someone could have broken in without me knowing, right? At least, that's what I told myself. But when I checked the deadbolt on my door, I realized it wasn't locked. I always lock my door. My first thought was to call the building manager, but when I grabbed my phone, it lit up for a second, just long enough for me to see a notification before it went black again. The message was from an unknown number. Delete all copies of document 404. Final warning. I just stared at the screen, my stomach twisting into a knot. How did they even get my number? And if they wanted me to delete the file, why go through all this trouble? I'd already gotten rid of it. I decided to leave my apartment for a bit, clear my head. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my laptop, just in case, and headed to the Starbucks on the corner of 7th and 49th. It was busy, as always. Tourists lining up for caramel macchiatos, college kids typing away on their MacBooks. The noise was comforting, like I was surrounded by normal people doing normal things. I found a seat in the back and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was check my browser history. Part of me wanted to make sure the XNR archive wasn't still there, like some ghost I couldn't get rid of. But the history was completely wiped. No trace of the website, no record of the Bitcoin transaction, nothing. It was like it never happened. That's when I noticed a new folder on my desktop. It was called Backup. I didn't create it. My heart started racing as I clicked it open. Inside was the same PDF file, Lunar Theories 1983.pdf, the same one I'd deleted. I slammed my laptop shut and just sat there, trying not to freak out. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not just in a paranoid way, but in a literal way, like someone was standing over my shoulder. I glanced around the cafe, trying to look casual, but my eyes caught on this guy sitting near the door. He was wearing a black hoodie, sunglasses, and a surgical mask. Not exactly unusual for New York, but there was something off about him. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't reading, wasn't even drinking coffee. He was just sitting there, staring straight ahead. I told myself I was being ridiculous. The guy was probably waiting for someone, but when I stood up to leave, so did he. The walk back to my apartment felt like a nightmare. Every time I turned a corner, I swear I saw that guy in the black hoodie trailing behind me. He kept his distance, but I could feel his eyes on me. I thought about ducking into a McDonald's or one of the souvenir shops along the way, but I didn't want to get trapped inside. I just wanted to get home, lock the door, and pretend none of this was happening. When I finally reached my building, I sprinted up the stairs to my apartment. I barely managed to lock the door before I collapsed against it, my chest heaving. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "We know you opened it again." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little noise made me jump. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the pipes, even the sound of my upstairs neighbor walking around. I kept thinking about that guy in the cafe. Who was he? Was he part of some government agency? A hired thug? Around 3 a.m., I finally worked up the courage to open the file again. I know, stupid, right? But at that point, I just wanted answers. If someone was willing to go to these lengths to keep me quiet, I had to know why. The document looked the same as before, but as I scrolled through it, I noticed something new. A series of coordinates at the very end, 27.3 degrees north, 3.6 degrees west. I Googled them. The location was in the middle of the Sahara Desert. No towns, no landmarks, just miles and miles of empty sand. But the weirdest part? When I switched to satellite view, the image was completely blacked out, like someone had erased it from the map. That's when the power went out. My entire apartment plunged into darkness. No streetlights outside, no glow from my laptop, nothing, just pitch black. And then I heard it, a faint tapping sound coming from my window. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. My apartment is 6 stories up. There's no fire escape, no ledge for someone to stand on. But the tapping kept going, rhythmic and deliberate. When I finally worked up the courage to peek through the blinds, my heart nearly stopped. There was a face staring back at me. It wasn't human. The eyes were too large, the skin too pale, almost translucent. It tilted its head, as if studying me, and then raised a single finger to its lips. I don't remember what happened after that. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was lying on my couch. My laptop was gone. So was my phone. I haven't told anyone about this, mostly because I don't think they'd believe me. But every so often, I'll get random texts from unknown numbers, short messages like, "You should have left it alone," or "You won't be warned again." And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that tapping sound. I didn't tell anyone what happened after that night. How could I? Who would believe me if I said I saw something inhuman tapping on my 6th-floor window? Every time I replayed it in my mind, I felt more insane. The face, those eyes, it was like looking at something that shouldn't exist, like my brain couldn't fully process it. But what scared me most wasn't the face. It was the silence afterward. For days, I didn't hear a single tap. No mysterious texts, no weird blackouts, just nothing. And let me tell you, the silence wasn't comforting. It was worse. It felt like waiting for a storm to hit, watching the sky grow darker, but never knowing when the first strike of lightning would come. A week passed, and I started convincing myself I'd imagined it all. The lack of sleep, the stress, It had to have messed with my head. I even convinced myself that the face in the window was just a hallucination. But then, something happened that made it all too real again. I was at work that night, bartending at the usual dive bar near Times Square. It was a slow shift, just a couple of regulars nursing beers while the TV blared some Knicks game in the background. I was wiping down the counter when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze. The texts had stopped days ago, but now, out of nowhere, another unknown number popped up on my screen. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something about the notification pulled me in. The message simply read, "We know you haven't stopped looking." I didn't even need to open it. My stomach dropped, and my hand started shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. "Hey, you good, man?" one of the regulars asked, giving me a concerned look. "Yeah, fine," I muttered, slipping my phone into my pocket. "Just tired." I finished my shift without looking at my phone again. By the time I got back to my apartment, my nerves were completely shot. The streets outside were unusually empty for a Friday night, and every shadow felt like it was hiding something. When I got inside, I didn't bother turning on the lights. I didn't want to see if something or someone was waiting for me. Instead, I sat on my couch, staring at the dark screen of my phone. Part of me wanted to delete the text, but another part, the part that got me into this mess in the first place, couldn't let it go. I opened the message. This time, there was an attachment. It was a photo. The image showed a dimly lit room, maybe a basement or a storage unit. The walls were concrete, stained with what looked like watermarks, or maybe something worse. In the center of the room was a single chair, and on that chair was me. I stared at the photo, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. It wasn't just some guy who looked like me. It was me. Same hoodie, same messy hair, same exhausted expression I'd seen in the mirror that morning. But I'd never been in that room before. At least I didn't think I had. I couldn't sleep that night. How could I, after seeing something like that? The rational part of me wanted to believe it was some sick prank. Maybe someone photoshopped the image to mess with me. But another part, the part that kept replaying the face at my window, knew better. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I went to the Starbucks on the corner, grabbed my usual cold brew, and sat by the window, scrolling through my phone. But my mind kept wandering back to the photo. Who sent it? Where was that room? And more importantly, how did they get a picture of me sitting in that chair? As I sipped my coffee, I noticed something strange. A black van was parked across the street, its windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. At first, I thought it was just a delivery van, but it didn't move. For hours, every time I glanced at it, my stomach twisted a little tighter. Was it the same van I'd seen outside my apartment a week ago? I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. That night, I finally decided to take matters into my own hands. I logged back onto the dark web, something I swore I'd never do again. My laptop felt like it was burning a hole in my lap as I searched for the XNR archive. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe some clue, some explanation. But when I tried to access the site, it was gone. The URL didn't work anymore. It was like it had been wiped from existence. I sat there staring at the error message on my screen when I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. My blood ran cold. I turned toward the window, but this time, I didn't see a face. The blinds were drawn, but the tapping continued, slow and deliberate. I stood up, my legs trembling, and moved toward the window. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was going to burst. When I finally pulled the blinds aside, there was no one there. But written on the glass, in what looked like black ink, were the words, "Stop digging." I didn't know what to do. Call the police? What would I even tell them? That someone was stalking me through the internet and leaving cryptic messages on my window. They'd probably lock me up for sounding insane. So I did the only thing I could think of. I packed a bag, grabbed my passport, and booked the first flight out of the city. I didn't even care where it was going. As I sat in the terminal at JFK, waiting for my flight to board, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time someone walked past me, I flinched. Every time my phone buzzed, I nearly jumped out of my seat. When the boarding announcement came, I stood up and started toward the gate. But as I handed my ticket to the agent, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around, and my heart stopped. It was the man in the black hoodie. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes said it all. You can run, but you can't hide. The man didn't say a word. He just stared at me, his face hidden behind that black hoodie and sunglasses. For a split second, I thought about running, but the look in his eyes, what little I could see of them, froze me in place. "Don't board the plane," he said, his voice low and even. "It won't make a difference." I wanted to scream, to push him away and run through the gate, but my body didn't listen. It was like I was paralyzed. "If you get on that plane," he continued, "you'll be putting everyone on it at risk. Do you want that on your conscience?" He let go of my shoulder and stepped back, his presence somehow making the busy terminal feel suffocatingly small. He didn't wait for me to answer. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like he'd never been there at all. I didn't get on the plane. The next few days were a blur. I checked into a cheap motel in Queens and kept the curtains shut tight. Every time I heard footsteps outside my room, my heart would race. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat on the bed, staring at my laptop, trying to piece together what the hell was happening to me. The folder, the photo, the face at my window, it all felt like some kind of sick game, and I was the only one playing. Then, on the third night, my laptop turned on by itself. I had left it on the table, completely shut down, but now the screen was glowing in the darkness of the room. At first, I thought it was another glitch, some leftover paranoia from the XNR archive, but then a single file appeared on the desktop. PlayMe.mp4. I didn't want to click it. Every instinct in my body told me to shut the laptop and toss it out the window. But curiosity, stupid, dangerous curiosity, got the better of me. My hand shook as I moved the cursor over the file and double-clicked it. The video was grainy, like it had been recorded on an old security camera. The timestamp in the corner said it was filmed just a few hours ago. The footage showed a small, windowless room with concrete walls and a single chair in the center. Someone was sitting in the chair. It took me a moment to realize who it was. It was me. I leaned closer to the screen, my breathing shallow. The me in the video was slumped forward, hands tied behind my back, head drooping like I was unconscious. The room was lit by a single bare bulb that swung slightly, casting moving shadows on the walls. Then, the door opened. A figure stepped into the room, dressed in all black, with their face obscured. They moved with a chilling calmness, circling the chair like a predator stalking its prey. The me in the video started to stir, lifting my head weakly. I looked terrified, my eyes wide and darting around the room. "What? What do you want?" my voice stammered from the speakers. The figure didn't answer. Instead, they reached into their pocket and pulled out a knife. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to pass out. My hands were shaking so violently that I couldn't even hold onto the laptop. It fell to the floor with a loud thud, the screen going black. What the hell was I watching? How could that even be possible? I was here, in this motel room, safe as far as I knew. So how was there a video of me tied to a chair? I wanted to believe it was fake, but the fear in my own eyes, the trembling in my voice, it was too real. The knocking started an hour later. It was soft at first, almost polite. 3 quick raps on the motel door. I didn't answer. I sat on the bed, clutching my phone like it was some kind of lifeline, staring at the door. The knocking came again, louder this time. "Who is it?" I finally managed to choke out. No response. My heart was racing as I crept toward the door. I looked through the peephole, but the hallway was empty. Then, the knocking came again, this time from the bathroom door. There was no way. I was the only one in the room. The bathroom door had been open all night. I could see the empty space from where I was standing, but now it was closed, and the knocking was coming from the other side. I backed away, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't possible. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. I grabbed the motel's landline phone and dialed 911, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely hit the buttons. The call connected, but all I heard was static. Then, over the static, a voice whispered, "You were warned." The bathroom door swung open with a deafening bang, and I dropped the phone. The lights in the room flickered, casting the space into a strobe-like nightmare. Standing in the doorway was the figure from the video. Their face was still obscured, but the knife in their hand glinted in the dim light. They didn't move, just stood there, blocking the doorway, the knife held at their side like it was a natural extension of their body. I backed up against the wall, my breath coming in shallow gasps. "Why are you doing this?" I yelled. The figure tilted their head, almost like they were amused. Then they raised a finger to their lips, the same gesture the face at my window had made. The lights went out completely. For a few agonizing seconds, there was only silence. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. I fumbled for my phone, the flashlight, anything, but my hands were useless. When the lights flickered back on, the figure was gone. The knife, however, was stuck in the wall next to me. Taped to the handle was a single note, scrawled in jagged handwriting. "Running won't save you." I didn't think. I just ran, out the motel door, down the hallway, and into the freezing night air. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to get as far away from that room as possible. My legs felt like jelly, but adrenaline pushed me forward, one shaky step after another. The streets were empty. No cars, no people, just the sound of my footsteps echoing in the cold, dead air. It felt wrong, like the world had been hollowed out, and I was the last person left. I didn't stop running until I reached a 24-hour diner a few blocks away. The neon sign buzzed weakly, flickering on and off like it could die at any second. I burst through the door, drawing a few confused stares from the 2 people inside, a waitress and a trucker hunched over a plate of pancakes. "You okay, hon?" the waitress asked, her voice laced with concern. I couldn't speak. I just nodded and stumbled to a booth in the corner, my back pressed against the wall so I could see the entrance. I sat there for hours, staring at the door, waiting for the figure to walk in. The waitress brought me coffee, and I clutched the mug like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. The diner's TV was playing some late-night news broadcast, the volume low. I wasn't paying attention until I caught a few familiar words. Breaking news, mysterious blackout at Queen's Motel. I turned to look at the screen. The anchor was standing in front of the very motel I'd just escaped from. Reports of a power outage and strange activity. Police have cordoned off the area, citing an ongoing investigation. Witnesses claim to have seen unidentified individuals entering and exiting the building. I felt the blood drain from my face. I wasn't imagining it. Something real was happening. As I stared at the screen, I noticed a shadow flicker in the diner's window. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I turned my head towards the glass, half expecting to see the figure standing there, knife in hand. But there was nothing, just my own pale reflection staring back at me. I tried to think of someone I could call for help, a friend, family, anyone. But who could I trust? Every time I thought about explaining what was happening, I pictured the look they'd give me, the pity, the disbelief. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and started scrolling through my contacts. That's when I noticed it. A new app on my phone. I didn't download it. The icon was simple. A plain black circle. There was no name, no description, just the black dot, sitting there on my home screen, like it had always been there. I stared at it, my pulse racing. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to click it. And then the app opened by itself. The screen went black for a moment, and then a live video feed popped up. It showed a room I didn't recognize, dark, cluttered, with walls covered in strange symbols. At the center of the frame was a figure tied to a chair. It was me again. This time, I was awake. My face was bruised, my clothes torn. I was struggling against the restraints, panic etched into every line of my face. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone across the room, but I couldn't look away. The video feed felt more real than anything around me, like I was watching something that was happening in another dimension. The figure from before stepped into the frame, their face still obscured. They held something in their hand, a small device with a single red button. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The figure pressed the button. The screen went black again, but not before I heard a sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. My own screams. I dropped the phone, my chest heaving, my mind racing. Was that my future? Some kind of twisted premonition? Or was it happening right now, somewhere I couldn't see? Before I could even begin to process it, my phone buzzed again. A new text message popped up from an unknown number. "You can't run from this." I stumbled out of the diner, ignoring the waitress calling after me. I didn't care where I was going anymore. I just needed to get away. But as I walked down the street, I realized something terrifying. Every streetlight was off. The city was pitch black. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight, but the screen wouldn't turn on. The text was still there, glowing faintly against the darkness. "Look behind you." I froze. My body refused to move, every muscle locked in place. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Slowly, I turned around. The street was empty. No cars, no people, just shadows stretching out in every direction. But then I saw it. At the far end of the block, standing perfectly still, was the figure. They didn't move. They didn't speak. But I could feel their eyes on me, even from that distance. And then they started walking, slow, deliberate steps, closing the distance between us with terrifying calmness. I ran. I don't know how long I ran for. My legs burned, my chest ached, but I didn't stop. The streets blurred together, and the world felt like it was folding in on itself. No matter how far I went, I could feel them behind me, closing in. Eventually, I ended up in an alleyway, cornered by two high walls. There was nowhere left to go. I turned around, gasping for air, and saw the figures standing at the mouth of the alley. They raised a hand and pointed at me. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted, my voice cracking. For the first time, they spoke. "You were never supposed to know." The last thing I remember is them raising the knife. When I woke up, I was back in my apartment. Everything looked normal. My bed, my clothes, even my laptop sitting on the desk. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. But then I saw the note on my pillow. It was written in the same jagged handwriting as before. "You can't escape." And taped to the note was a photo of me, sitting in that chair. I found a dark web forum claiming the government controls earthquakes. The coordinates they gave me showed a facility in my state. It started with boredom. Friday night, nothing to do, scrolling aimlessly through YouTube and TikTok, while my best friend Alex spammed my phone with memes and stupid conspiracy theories. We'd been on a kick lately, watching all those dark web horror stories people love to tell. Animated ones, narrated ones, even the ridiculously over-the-top Red Room nonsense. At some point, I said to Alex, "Do you think any of that's real?" He replied with a single message. Only one way to find out. That's how I ended up on the dark web. I'll admit, getting there wasn't as thrilling as I thought. After a few quick Google searches, I downloaded Tor, set up a VPN, and started poking around. At first, it was mostly disappointing. Sure, there were some sketchy sites, marketplaces selling fake IDs and worse, but nothing that screamed terrifying deep secrets. Most of it looked like Craigslist's uglier cousin. Just when I was about to call it a bust, I found a link buried in a forum. The site was called Tremor Talk. The tagline hooked me immediately. "You felt them. Now learn the truth." The site's design was bare bones, black background, white text, no images. But the threads were packed with posts about earthquakes, graphs, maps, documents, even grainy photos of what looked like underground bunkers. The users had weird names like Richter Code and Seismicanon, and they weren't just ranting conspiracy theorists. They sounded credible. Some of the posts were hyper-technical, full of jargon I didn't understand. Others were simpler, detailing strange experiences near supposed fault lines, vibrations that came out of nowhere, areas that weren't seismic hotspots, suddenly shaking for no reason, people hearing weird hums in the ground before tremors started. One thread caught my eye. It was titled, "Proof They're Controlling It. Coordinates inside." I clicked. The post was short and to the point. "If you want to know the truth, DM me. But don't blame me if you don't like what you find." My hands hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct told me this was stupid, that I was stepping into something I didn't understand. But curiosity won. I sent a message to the user, Quake Master. He responded almost immediately. "You're braver than most. Here's what you're looking for." The message included a set of GPS coordinates. No explanation, no warning, just the numbers. I pasted them into Google Maps. The coordinates pointed to a location about an hour away from my house, near Sacramento, California. It was a nondescript industrial area, surrounded by warehouses and factories. I stared at the screen for a long time. Was this real? A prank? A trap? I texted Alex. Yo, I think I found something crazy. Want to check it out? What did you find? He replied. Earthquake conspiracy. Dark web stuff. I'll explain tomorrow. Meet me at the Starbucks by your place. There was a long pause before he responded. You're gonna get us killed. See you at 10 the next morning. By the time I picked Alex up, I was already second-guessing myself. He climbed into the passenger seat with a venti iced coffee and a smirk. All right, he said. What's this dark web adventure you've dragged me into? I told him everything on the drive. The forum, the creepy posts, the coordinates. He listened, sipping his coffee, occasionally shaking his head. So, let me get this straight, he said. You found some random forum on the dark web, talked to a dude named Quakemaster, and now we're driving to investigate his shady coordinates. You're out of your mind. Probably, I admitted. But what if it's real? What if there's actually something out there? He sighed. Fine. But if we get murdered, I'm haunting you. The drive took about an hour. At first, it felt like just another road trip. Music blasting, joking around, and a quick stop at McDonald's for fries. But as we got closer, the mood shifted. The industrial area was eerily quiet. Most of the buildings were old and run down, with faded signs and broken windows. It looked like the kind of place you'd see in a crime drama, right before something terrible happened. This is it, I said, pulling into a gravel lot. The coordinates led us to a small concrete building at the far end of the lot. It had no windows, no signage, just a rusted metal door and a single security camera mounted above it, slowly panning back and forth. Dude, Alex muttered, staring at the building. This looks like a murder den. I forced a laugh, but I was just as freaked out. The place felt wrong. What now? Alex asked. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but the other part, the reckless, curious part, needed to know what was inside. We go in, I said, my voice shaking slightly. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a loud creak, revealing a dimly lit room. The air inside was cold and stale, like the air in a basement that hadn't been touched in years. The walls were lined with metal panels, and the floor was covered in rubber tiles that squeaked under our shoes. In the center of the room was a desk with a single computer monitor. The screen glowed faintly, displaying what looked like a real-time map of seismic activity. What the hell is this? Alex asked, leaning over the desk. The map was detailed. Too detailed. It showed red dots scattered across the globe, each one labeled with a date, time, and magnitude. Some of the dots were moving, shifting slightly, as if the data was being updated in real time. This can't be real, I said, staring at the screen. Before Alex could respond, the monitor flickered, and a new message appeared in bold red text. You shouldn't be here. The message on the screen, you shouldn't be here, froze us in place. Alex was the first to speak, his voice shaky. What the hell does that mean? Before I could answer, the monitor flickered again. The red text disappeared, replaced by a new line. Leaving now won't save you. I felt a chill run down my spine. My eyes darted toward the door, but when I turned the handle, it wouldn't budge. It was locked. Try harder, Alex shouted, panic creeping into his voice. I'm trying, I hissed, yanking on the handle with all my strength. But it was no use. The hum started then, faint at first, like the buzz of an old fluorescent light, but it grew louder, filling the room. The walls began to vibrate, and the floor beneath us felt alive, thrumming with some kind of energy. Alex stumbled backward, his eyes wide. "Do you feel that? It's like the ground's moving." "I feel it," I said, glancing at the monitor. The seismic map on the screen had changed. One of the red dots, just outside Sacramento, was pulsing now, its numbers updating rapidly. The magnitude had jumped from 0.3 to 3.7 in seconds, and it was climbing. "This can't be real," I whispered, more to myself than to Alex. But it felt real. The lights flickered, and the hum became deafening. Alex grabbed my arm, pulling me away from the monitor. "We have to get out of here. Now." "I'm trying," I snapped, my voice cracking as I scanned the room for another exit. That's when I saw it. A narrow hallway on the far side of the room. It hadn't been there when we came in. The walls of the hallway were the same dull grey metal as the room, and dim flickering lights ran along the ceiling. I had no idea where it led, but it didn't matter. It was our only option. "This way," I said, dragging Alex toward the hallway. We ran, the hum growing louder with every step. The hallway seemed endless, stretching far longer than the size of the building should have allowed. Pipes ran along the walls, some of them hissing softly, others vibrating in time with the hum. "Where the hell is this going?" Alex panted, his breath ragged. "I don't know," I admitted, my heart racing. The air grew colder as we ran, and the floor began to tilt slightly, sloping downward. It didn't feel like we were in a building anymore. It felt like we were descending into the earth. After what felt like forever, we reached a door. It was heavy, made of steel, with no handle or visible way to open it. "What now?" Alex asked, his voice laced with desperation. Before I could respond, the hum stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. For a moment, neither of us moved, the only sound our ragged breathing. Then slowly, the steel door slid open with a hiss, revealing another room. This one was much larger than the first. The walls were lined with machines, huge, complex devices covered in blinking lights and dials. In the center of the room was a platform surrounded by thick cables that pulsed faintly with a sickly green light. But what caught my attention wasn't the machines. It was the figure standing in the middle of the room. They were dressed in a white hazmat suit, their face obscured by a reflective visor. In one hand, they held a small device that looked like a remote control. In the other, a syringe filled with a black, viscous liquid. "Who the hell are you?" Alex demanded, stepping forward. The figure tilted their head slightly, as if considering him. Then, in a cold, mechanical voice, they spoke. "You shouldn't have come here." Before we could react, the figure pressed a button on the remote. The machines around the room roared to life, and the hum returned, louder than ever. The floor beneath us shook violently, and I realized, with a sinking feeling, what was happening. "Is that an earthquake?" Alex asked, his voice trembling. The figure didn't answer. Instead, they stepped toward us, raising the syringe. "Stay back," I shouted, grabbing a piece of broken pipe from the floor. The figure ignored me, their movements calm and deliberate. When they were just a few feet away, Alex lunged at them, trying to knock the syringe from their hand. It happened so fast. The figure sidestepped him effortlessly, grabbing Alex by the arm and plunging the syringe into his neck. Alex screamed, a raw, guttural sound that sent chills down my spine. The black liquid in the syringe emptied into his veins, and his body convulsed violently. "Stop it!" I yelled, swinging the pipe at the figure. The metal connected with their head, and they stumbled back, dropping the syringe. Alex collapsed to the floor, his body twitching as the black substance spread through his veins, turning them dark and jagged. His eyes rolled back in his head, and for a moment, I thought he was dead. Then his eyes snapped open, but they weren't his eyes anymore. They were completely black, like twin voids staring straight through me. "Alex," I whispered, stepping toward him. He didn't respond. Instead, he let out a low, inhuman growl and lunged at me. I barely had time to react. I dodged to the side, and Alex crashed into the wall, cracking the metal panel. He turned toward me, his movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette being controlled by invisible strings. "Alex, stop," I pleaded. "It's me." But it wasn't him anymore. The figure in the hazmat suit got to their feet, their visor now cracked, revealing pale, bloodless skin underneath. They pressed another button on the remote, and the machines whirred louder, the earthquake intensifying. "You don't understand," they said, their distorted voice barely audible over the chaos. "This is bigger than you, bigger than him. They're coming." "Who's coming?" I shouted, clutching the pipe tightly. The figure didn't answer. Instead, they reached for something on their belt, a small, cylindrical device. "Run," they said, their voice suddenly soft. Then they pressed the cylinder, and everything went white. When the flash faded, I was on the ground. My ears were ringing, and my vision was blurry. The machines were silent now, their lights dim. The hum that had been driving me insane was gone. For a moment, I thought everything was over. Then I remembered Alex. "Alex," I croaked, struggling to sit up. He was standing in the corner of the room facing the wall. His body was still, unnervingly so, except for the faint rise and fall of his shoulders. "Alex," I said again, louder this time. Slowly, he turned to face me. My stomach dropped. His eyes were completely black, and his veins, those awful, dark veins, had spread across his face and arms, branching out like cracks in a shattered mirror. His mouth twitched, curling into a smile that didn't belong to him. "You okay, man?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to figure out what I was. "Alex," I said, rising to my feet. "It's me. It's..." He lunged. I barely had time to dodge. He slammed into the wall behind me, the impact denting the metal. When he turned around, his movements were jerky and unnatural, like a puppet on strings. "Alex, stop," I shouted, gripping the broken pipe I'd used earlier. He charged again, his face twisted into something feral. This time, I didn't hesitate. I swung the pipe as hard as I could, catching him in the side of the head. He staggered, but he didn't fall. "Alex, please," I begged. "You're not yourself." But it wasn't Alex anymore. The figure in the hazmat suit was lying on the floor a few feet away, their visor shattered completely. I ran over to them, desperate for answers. "What's happening to him?" I demanded, shaking them. The figure coughed, blood dribbling from their lips. "You shouldn't have come here," they rasped. "I know that now. But what's wrong with him? How do I fix it?" The figure laughed weakly. "You can't. He's a carrier now." "A carrier of what?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "They're in the earth," the figure whispered, their voice barely audible. "They've always been there, waiting. We just woke them up." Before I could ask anything else, they convulsed violently. Black liquid began oozing from their eyes and mouth, the same substance that had been injected into Alex. Within seconds, they stopped moving. I turned back to Alex, who was still standing by the wall, his head twitching unnaturally. "Alex, if you can hear me, "Fight this," I said, my voice shaking. "We'll get out of here. I promise." For a moment, he froze, his black eyes locking onto mine. Then he smiled, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched his face inhumanly. "They're awake," he said, his voice distorted and layered, like multiple people were speaking at once. "And they're hungry." The descent, the floor began to shake again, harder than before. It wasn't just an earthquake. It felt like the ground was alive, pulsing with something beneath the surface. The machines in the room roared back to life, their lights flashing erratically. The platform in the center started to glow, and the cables connected to it pulsed with that same sickly green light. I didn't know what the hell was happening, but I knew I had to get out. I bolted for the hallway, but Alex was faster. He grabbed me by the arm, his grip impossibly strong, and threw me to the ground. "You can't leave," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "You have to see it. Feel it." He grabbed my leg, dragging me toward the platform. I kicked and screamed, but his strength was inhuman. "Alex, stop," I begged. He didn't even flinch. When we reached the platform, the cables writhed like snakes, wrapping themselves around my arms and legs. The moment they touched me, a searing pain shot through my body. It was like I could feel the earth itself, deep, endless, and alive. There was something massive beneath the surface, something ancient and angry. "Do you feel it?" Alex asked, his voice calm now. "Do you hear them calling?" "Please," I whimpered. "You're my best friend. Don't do this." He tilted his head again, his black eyes studying me. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something human, something him, in his expression. Then it was gone. The cables tightened, and I felt the ground beneath the platform give way. It wasn't a floor anymore. It was a pit, a gaping hole that seemed to go on forever. And from the darkness below, I heard them. Voices, thousands of them, whispering, screaming, laughing. I looked down, and for the first time, I saw what was beneath the earth. They weren't human. They were massive, writhing shapes, their forms shifting and impossible to comprehend. Eyes, mouths, limbs, too many of each, emerged and disappeared, their movements slow and deliberate. The whispers grew louder, blending into a deafening roar. "They're coming," Alex said, smiling down at me. "And you'll be the first to welcome them." The cables pulled me towards the edge of the pit. I struggled, screamed, but it was useless. The voices below were inside my head now, tearing at my thoughts, my memories, my sanity. Just as I was about to fall, the machines around the room exploded in a shower of sparks. The cables released me, and I hit the ground hard, gasping for air. The shaking stopped. The lights flickered, then died completely, plunging the room into darkness. When I came to, I was lying in the gravel lot outside the facility. The building was gone, completely gone, as if it had never been there. Alex was nowhere to be seen. I stumbled to my car, my body aching, and drove home in a daze. Aftermath. That was 3 days ago. I haven't slept since. I can still hear the whispers, faint but constant, like a radio I can't turn off. Sometimes, I feel the ground tremble beneath me, subtle but unmistakable. I don't know where Alex is, or if he's even Alex anymore. But I do know one thing. They're still down there, and they're not done. I tried to move on. I really did. I told myself that what happened at the facility wasn't real, that it was just a nightmare brought on by too much curiosity and too little sleep. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, the truth lingered like a bad taste in my mouth. The whispers didn't stop. At first, they were faint, like a soft breeze rustling through the trees. I thought I could ignore them, but over the next few days, they grew louder, more persistent. They weren't random either. They said my name. Nathan. Hearing your name in a voice that isn't yours, coming from nowhere, is enough to break anyone. It didn't matter if I was alone in my apartment, driving through traffic, or standing in line at Starbucks. They were always there, whispering, watching, and then the shaking started. It wasn't a full-blown earthquake, at least not at first. Just small tremors, subtle vibrations that seemed to follow me wherever I went. The first time it happened, I was at home, sitting on my couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone. The floor beneath me trembled, just enough to knock over a glass of water on the coffee table. I thought it was a coincidence, but then it happened again and again. In the span of 3 days, I felt tremors at work, at the grocery store, and even in my car while I was stopped at a red light. Each time, they were more intense, and each time, I heard the whispers growing louder. That's when I noticed the black veins. It started with a faint discoloration on my left hand, a thin, dark line running from my wrist to my palm. I thought it was a bruise. Maybe I'd bumped into something and didn't remember. But as the hours passed, the line grew thicker, branching out like roots under my skin. I tried scrubbing it off in the shower, but it didn't work. The veins weren't on my skin. They were inside me. By the next morning, they had spread up my arm and onto my chest. The whispers were deafening now, an endless cacophony of voices screaming over each other. I barely ate. I barely slept. I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore. The search for answers. I don't know why I went back to the coordinates. Maybe I thought the facility would be there again, that I'd find Alex, or the figure in the hazmat suit, or that I'd get some kind of explanation. But when I arrived, it was the same as before, an empty gravel lot. I parked my car and sat there for a long time, staring at the spot where the building had been. The whispers in my head were relentless, screaming at me to leave, to run, to hide. But I couldn't. Something about that place was pulling me in. I stepped out of the car, my legs shaking as I walked across the lot. The air was heavy, thick with the same metallic tang I'd noticed inside the facility. My footsteps felt too loud, echoing unnaturally in the stillness. Then I saw it. A single metal hatch embedded in the ground, hidden beneath a layer of gravel. I knelt down and brushed the stones away, revealing a rusted circular door with a small handle. There was no lock, no markings, just a dull, lifeless surface that somehow felt wrong to touch. The whispers in my head screamed louder as I gripped the handle and pulled. The second descent, the hatch opened with a low groan, revealing a narrow ladder leading into the darkness. The air that wafted up smelled of damp earth and something else, something rancid. I didn't want to go down. Every part of me was screaming to close the hatch and drive as far away as possible. But I couldn't. The whispers had changed. They weren't just random voices anymore. They were guiding me. Down! Down! Find it! I climbed down the ladder, my heart pounding with every step. The further I descended, the darker it got, until the faint light from the surface was just a distant memory. At the bottom, I found myself in a tunnel. The walls were rough, carved from stone, and the floor was damp, covered in patches of moss and mud. A faint green light pulsed from deeper within, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. The whispers were deafening now, overlapping in a language I couldn't understand. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I walked forward. The tunnel opened into a cavern, massive and alien. The walls were covered in pulsating black veins, just like the ones spreading across my body. The green light was coming from the center of the cavern, where a large, organic structure loomed. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't man-made. It looked alive. It was massive, shaped like a jagged sphere, with tendrils spreading out in every direction, anchoring it to the cavern walls. The surface was covered in eyes, mouths, and other shapes that shouldn't have been possible. They shifted constantly, melting into one another, never staying the same for more than a second. The whispers stopped. A low rumble filled the cavern, vibrating through my bones. One of the tendrils detached from the wall and slithered toward me. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. When the tendril reached me, it stopped, hovering inches from my face. A single eye opened at its tip, staring into me. It spoke, not in words, but in a wave of emotions that crashed into me like a tidal wave. Anger, hunger, and something far worse, curiosity. "You're not ready," it said, its voice reverberating through my mind. "But you will be." Before I could react, the tendril lunged forward, stabbing into my chest. Pain exploded through my body, and the world went black. Aftermath. I woke up in my car, parked outside the gravel lot. The hatch was gone. The lot was empty. The black veins were still there, spreading further across my body. The whispers were back, quieter now, but more insistent. I know now that there's no escaping this. Whatever I saw in that cavern, whatever it is, it's not done with me. And I don't think it ever will be. I've spent the last 3 days trying to convince myself that none of this is real. But the truth is, there's no denying it anymore. The black veins have taken over most of my body now, crawling up my neck and twisting around my face. When I look in the mirror, I barely recognize myself. But it's not just my appearance that's changed. Something's happening inside me. The first sign came the day after I left the gravel lot. I woke up in a cold sweat, my body shaking violently. For a moment, I thought it was another earthquake, until I realized it was me causing it. The floorboards beneath my bed creaked and groaned as if they were being pushed apart. Then I heard the whispers again, louder than ever. "Soon, soon." I stumbled out of bed, clutching my head as the voices grew more insistent. My body felt wrong, like I didn't belong inside it anymore. My chest was tight, and my veins pulsed with a searing heat that made my vision blur. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The whispers faded, the trembling subsided, and I was left alone in the silence. Invited guests. That night, I heard someone outside my apartment. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, but when I glanced through the peephole, I saw 2 men standing in the hallway. They were wearing black suits and earpieces, the kind you'd see on Secret Service agents. One of them was holding a device that looked like a tablet. The other had a small metal case tucked under his arm. I froze, my hand hovering over the lock. "They know," one of the whispers said, clear as day. One of the men looked directly at the door. It was like he heard the whisper. His expression didn't change, but he turned to his partner and nodded. I backed away, my heart pounding. Seconds later, they started pounding on the door. "Mr. Carter," one of them said, his voice calm but firm. "We know you're in there. We need to speak with you." I didn't answer. "Open the door," he said again, his tone sharper this time. "You don't have much time." The whispers were screaming now, overlapping and frantic. I couldn't think, couldn't move. "Run!" one of them roared, louder than the rest. I didn't need to be told twice. The chase. I grabbed my car keys and bolted out the back door of my apartment, running down the fire escape as fast as I could. Behind me, I heard the men break through the front door. "Target is mobile," one of them said, his voice echoing down the alley. I didn't stop to look back. When I reached my car, I threw myself inside and started the engine, peeling out of the parking lot. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely keep the wheel steady. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a black SUV pulling out behind me. Its headlights cut through the darkness, getting closer with every second. The whispers were still there, guiding me now. Left, right, faster, don't stop. I followed their directions, weaving through the empty streets of my neighborhood. But no matter how many turns I made, the SUV stayed on my tail. The collapse. The chase ended on an empty stretch of highway just outside the city. I didn't see the second SUV until it was too late. It swerved out of nowhere, cutting me off and forcing me to slam on the brakes. My car skidded to a stop, the tires screeching against the pavement. Before I could react, the men were on me. They pulled me out of the car, their movements quick and practiced. I tried to fight back, but they were stronger, and whatever was happening to my body had left me too weak to resist. They dragged me into the back of the SUV, pinning me down as one of them opened the metal case. Inside was a syringe filled with a bright red liquid. "This will stabilize him," the man said, holding the syringe up to the light. "No!" I screamed, thrashing against their grip. "You don't understand. It's not me. It's them." The man hesitated, glancing at his partner. "He's further along than we thought." "Doesn't matter," the other replied. "Just do it." The needle plunged into my neck, and the world dissolved into a blinding red haze. The vision. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the SUV anymore. I was standing in the cavern again, staring at the massive, pulsating sphere in the center. The tendrils were moving now, writhing and twisting like living things. The whispers were deafening, filling every inch of the space. "You've seen us," the voices said, their words layered and overlapping. "You know us." "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The tendrils reached out, brushing against my skin. I felt a surge of memories that weren't mine. Endless eons of darkness, of waiting, of hungering. "You are the bridge," the voices said, "the key to our release." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "You've got the wrong person. I'm not." Before I could finish, the tendrils plunged into my chest, and I felt myself being torn apart. The awakening. When I woke up, I was back in my car. The SUVs were gone. The black veins were gone too, but I didn't feel relief. I felt empty. The whispers were silent now, but I knew they weren't gone. They were waiting, biding their time. And deep beneath the earth, something was stirring. I can feel it, even now. They're awake, and they're coming.